Education Scotland's guidelines for early reading are organised across three main areas. These are building a literacy-rich environment through interactions, experiences and spaces, developing skills for reading, and building independent and engaged readers. For each of the areas pictured, a suite of videos has been developed to support professional learning. The videos have been carefully developed to align with Scotland's Curriculum for Excellence guidance. Throughout the video, some technical terms are used to describe aspects of early reading. The QR code shown on the slide will allow you to access a glossary with brief explanations of some of the terms used. Each area has been broken down into 4 themes. There is a video which explores each theme, identifying key messages and research which supports the guidance. This video is focused on the shared and guided experience of reading, as underlined on the slide. You may choose to watch this video in isolation, but it is recommended that the overall suite of videos is used to support a broader programme of professional learning. A range of planned approaches should be used by educators to develop reading skills whilst nurturing a love of reading. Within this video, we will explore 3 key messages, which are: lead interactive and shared experiences with text to support reading for pleasure and develop skills in authentic contexts. Use a range of guided reading approaches to support an individual or group of learners to read a text independently. Ensure research-informed guided and shared reading methods support the progress of the learner. A list of signposted resources has been created to accompany this video. At the end of the presentation, you can return to the home page for the overall resource or a landing page which has further support for shared and guided experiences of reading. In this video, we will explore how planned approaches can be used by educators to support reading progress. We will take account of 2 factors. The first is the wide range of skills, understanding and experience which children need to develop as they learn to read, such as the 5 components: concepts of print, background knowledge, oral language, and phonological awareness. Practical approaches should be carefully planned to meet learners' needs across these range of skills. The second factor is the importance of nurturing a love of reading, which encourages children to engage with text and build a positive reader identity as they learn to read. Planned approaches need to take account of children's motivations, interests and choices in order to foster and maintain positive attitudes to reading. This video will focus specifically on the 2 planned approaches of shared and guided reading. The image on the slide signifies how the 2 approaches complement one another, with each having a different purpose to play in supporting young children's reading development. We have defined shared reading as an educator sharing or reading a text with a child or group of children. This can include sharing books with children before they learn to read themselves, as well as reading text aloud to older children. Educators lead interactive and shared experiences with text with the aim of supporting reading for pleasure and developing skills through authentic, real-life texts. As the educator is responsible for reading aloud, all children can be included, regardless of their individual reading skills and abilities. The approach can be used with an individual or group of any size, allowing educators the scope to include the whole class. We have defined guided reading as a teaching approach in which the educator works with a small group of children who have a similar range of reading knowledge and skills at a particular point in time. This should allow all children in the group to access the same text. The aim of guided reading is to support an individual or group of learners to read a text independently. This differentiated approach is guided by the educator, who can provide support and challenge in response to the strengths and needs of each child in the group. The first key message suggests we should lead interactive and shared experiences with text to support reading for pleasure and develop skills in authentic contexts. Noble et al. Explain that there are many forms of shared reading. For example, interactive or dialogic reading involves using a specific set of techniques to scaffold a conversation between the adult and the child about the text. Other forms of shared reading target specific language skills such as vocabulary or phonological awareness, and use the text as a tool to teach the child these skills. Shared reading experiences can provide several benefits. These include the opportunity for educators to role model reading for pleasure, inspiring learners as they enthusiastically share and talk about texts. Reading aloud to children can help them to develop positive attitudes to reading and build their identity as a reader. The Centre for Literacy in Primary Education highlight that children are more likely to read independently if they have engaged in social reading experiences. Participation in interactive sessions can remove the barrier of decoding text for some learners, promoting a more inclusive shared reading experience. Shared reading provides the opportunity for children to explore the type of authentic text that they may come across within their home or community. This helps children to understand that print carries meaning and can connect to their everyday lives. Conversations about real-life texts can lead children to explore some of the interesting features. This can help them to develop a greater understanding of book handling, concepts of print, and language structure. Shared book reading also helps children to develop a range of skills. Playful exploration of a range of songs, rhymes and poems with children can provide opportunities to broaden vocabulary and identify patterns in language such as rhythm, rhyme and alliteration, helping them to develop their phonological awareness. The educator can model fluency for learners, allowing them to hear changes in pace as well as appropriate stress and intonation. Hearing text spoken aloud can help children to focus on the meaning as they develop their listening comprehension skills. It also allows children to hear rich and diverse language that they may not be able to access in texts independently. This helps to build their range of vocabulary and oral language skills. Educators can make use of shared text to model and practice children's developing phonic knowledge and skills. For example, pointing out previously taught graphemes in the text or highlighting words that start or end with the same sounds. Opportunities to interact with a wide range of texts and contexts can help to build children's background knowledge. Through shared experience and discussion of a range of different texts, children can be supported to integrate what they already know with new information. Making connections to their own experience, other texts they have explored, and wider understanding of the world can help children to infer meaning from a text. Children can then transfer their inference-making skills, which have been developed while listening to and discussing a text, to their independent reading. Oxley and McGowan suggest that the effectiveness of teacher read-alouds is likely to vary greatly and be determined by the extent to which the book aligns with the children's existing interests, preferences and lives, or successfully introduces children to new genres or topics that they enjoy. According to research, most books selected by educators are dated, with the average year of publication being 1994. In order to keep selected texts relevant and interesting, we can involve children in choosing or voting for the text that they would like to be read aloud. You may also wish to share texts around different themes or genres that the children have chosen. This could help the group to build a repertoire of texts in common that they all enjoy and can revisit regularly. Using distinct types of text is also an important consideration. If you are focusing on illustrations, print form, or word recognition, enlarged text in the form of big books, charts, or posters may be useful. Using texts of different lengths, formats, and genres during shared reading can expand children's knowledge and experience. If you are thinking about using digital text, the Education Endowment Foundation has found that print storybooks, electronic storybooks, and multimedia e-books can all contribute positively to children's literacy development. They also found that the way adults interact and support children during shared reading matters more than the type of book. Chosen text should have the scope to support interactions during the session. Honchel and Schultz have created the questions shown on the slide to help educators consider how children might interact with the selected text. What will the children notice? What connections are possible for this group of children? Where will you pause, wonder, and invite interaction? Where will the text draw the children in to read along? And how can the book be used to help the children feel like readers? In this quote, the International Literacy Association suggests that teacher read-alouds should feature books that serve what Rudine Sims Bishop refers to as mirrors, windows and doors, so that learners not only see themselves reflected in stories, but also are able to consider the perspectives of those who are different from themselves. Bishop further explains that mirrors are the opportunities for children to see themselves reflected in what they read. Windows offer children opportunities to look through and see the lives and perspective of others and see how they match up to their own. And sliding glass doors are the opportunities for learners to step inside the world of others and transform their perspective. Using well-considered text for shared reading can provide both the opportunity and environment for educators to discuss and explore these elements with children. The Centre for Literacy in Primary Education in 2023 carried out a research project to improve children's early language and literacy development. One of their key findings was that children are more engaged by high-quality text with strong human themes, especially those in which they see themselves reflected in the characters or story worlds. When children see themselves in text used across the classroom and curriculum, they become highly invested in the reading experience and contribute more to group discussions. However, we should be mindful that text can represent diverse people and contexts, but may have negative or deficit stereotypes. Chosen text should positively represent the diverse range of children's home language, culture, and identities within and beyond your setting. There are some important aspects to consider when adopting a shared reading approach. The first of these is professional learning and development. Nicola Cherry from the Education Endowment Foundation states that when you watch the approach of interactive reading in action, the knowledge and skill of the educator are clearly visible. A key finding is that staff are likely to benefit from training or professional development to use the approach effectively. Kremen et al. Also emphasised the importance of professional development, finding that as educators developed their reading aloud skills, they took more pleasure in doing the voices, inhabiting the text, and making it an interactive experience, with in-depth or brief conversations about what was being read and additional book recommendations. Another aspect to reflect on is the changing roles of the adult and child during shared reading experiences. In comparison to listening to a story passively, interactive reading encourages the child to play a more active role. Spoken interactions between the educator and child can go beyond the text, with increased participation in discussions supporting the development of the child's oral language skills. Over time, the balance of who reads or facilitates discussion about the text passes increasingly to the child. It is also important to think about the environment which will be used for shared reading. The space should be sufficient to accommodate all the children in the group, allowing them to sit comfortably and see the text. An intimate space will encourage children to avoid distractions and become more engaged. The shared text should also be readily available in the environment for the children to explore independently. The final aspect to consider is the organisation of shared reading sessions. As well as pausing at certain points to discuss the text, small group activities could be used, such as pair discussions of characters, themes, or other books by the author. Making connections to the text. This could be to life or other texts such as films, books, etc. Group freeze frames of what might happen next. The use of props or puppets, and inviting children to doodle or draw if they wish while the educator reads aloud. You may also invite different people to share text with children, for example, older children in the school, family members, or people from your local community. We are now going to consider some of the different prompts or strategies that can be used to scaffold the interactive conversation between the child and educator whilst reading. On the slide are some suggestions from the Education Endowment Foundation. Commenting, providing a sentence to articulate an observation. Recapping and reminding, modelling use of language to summarise the text. This supports the child to connect events and themes within the story. Expanding, responding to the child in a way that provides additional information. Imitation, encouraging the child to imitate the language that they have just had modelled to them. The child gets to apply the new knowledge they have heard. Extending, imitating a phrase that the child has used but adding an additional word or two that could develop the child's language and vocabulary. Explaining, providing information to support the child's understanding of the text and world around them. This could be through words, visuals, gestures, use of objects, or a combination of these. Questioning, using open-ended questioning to elicit a response from the child and providing the opportunity for them to use language. Completion, leaving a blank at the end of a sentence for the child to complete. Repetition. There are 3 ways to implement repetition. 1. Select books where key vocabulary and repeated refrains are used. 2. Use prompts to repeat or draw attention to key words and phrases. 3. Reread the book on several occasions to embed understanding and use of the key words and phrase by the child. An important aspect of interactive reading is the opportunity to expand oral language skills, especially vocabulary. A useful strategy to support this is through the pre-teaching of key vocabulary. It may be helpful to concentrate on any words which may hinder the child's understanding of the text, or that they are likely to use or read in other contexts. The 5 components of reading video provides information about the vocabulary which you may wish to focus on. We can also think about how we sequence prompts or strategies over the course of a shared reading session. For example, the educator can prompt the child to say something about the book. This could be by using pauses at each page turn to let the child talk first. Evaluate the child's response, noticing what they say or point to. Expand the child's response, boosting what they say by rephrasing or adding more information, and then repeat the prompt to help the child learn from the expansion. It is important that educators carefully consider the timings and number of prompts used so that children are encouraged to interact with the text without taking away from the overall flow or enjoyment of the story. Considering what type of questions to use is an important aspect of the shared reading approach. Jessica Folsom provides a helpful breakdown of 3 types of questions which can be used. Type 1 questions are basic questions focused on what can be immediately seen or read in the text. Type 1 also includes introducing new vocabulary. For example, while pointing to a picture, the educator may ask, "What type of feet does this animal have?" Here, the adult is looking for a specific, correct response to expand the child's oral vocabulary. Type 2 questions are open-ended and are used to seek the child's feedback. For example, the educator might ask, "What is happening in this part of the story?" Here the educator is trying to encourage the child to share what they are thinking about and make meaning from the text. Noble et al. Give 5 examples of open-ended question starters which can be used during reading. 1. Why questions? Why do you think? 2. Tell me prompts. Tell me about this picture. 3. What questions? What do you think? 4. How questions? How do you know? 5. I wonder prompts. I wonder what is happening in this picture. Type 3 questions are more advanced and introduce concepts like text features and story components. For example, the educator might ask, Who was the main character and how did he feel? This also may include questions that distance the child from the text and connect the story to their own life. For example, how would you feel if that happened to you? All question types are important for developing children's comprehension. Considering when to use different questioning will allow educators to tailor shared reading sessions to the abilities and needs of learners. The next key message we are going to focus on is how to use a range of guided reading approaches to support an individual or group of learners to read a text independently. Fountas and Pinnell tell us that the goal of the guided reading session for learners is not just to read this book or even to understand a single text. Instead, the goal of guided reading is to help learners build their reading power, to help build a range of strategies for processing text. The educator guides the reading development of each child in the group, providing just enough support before, during and after reading to develop their skills and understanding, encouraging them to become increasingly more independent readers. A flexible and dynamic approach is developed through ongoing observation and assessment, ensuring groups are formed and reformed based on children's strengths and changing needs. There may be times where children are not at a similar point in their reading development as a number of other learners, so may work on an individual basis rather than a group. Adopting a guided reading approach can provide several benefits. It can help educators to effectively cater for a broad range of learners, providing small group teaching that is tailored to a similar level of abilities and needs. Differentiation is possible when children learn in an environment where the educator is constantly observing and assessing their progress in order to provide appropriate levels of support and challenge. They can also identify times when it is appropriate to step back and let the learner take the lead. The guided reading approach can support children's oral language development, as both reading aloud and guided conversations about text encourage learners to build important skills such as oral vocabulary and expression. Combining high-quality reading text with planned opportunities for discussion can encourage rich dialogue about stories, topics and language. According to Fountas and Pinnell, when learners talk about their reading, they tend to use the language of text, which is usually more complex than their own. Another important benefit of guided reading is that it provides learners with the opportunity to independently apply and practice reading strategies that they have been taught. Text should be carefully matched to children so that they can apply their strategies to overcome the challenges they encounter and read independently with success. The educator is also readily available to prompt them to use strategies or model specific skills as needed. This approach can support learners to build the skills needed to read increasingly challenging text over time. Educators should carefully consider text choice when planning guided reading sessions. Hudson and Walker stress that guided reading seeks to teach the reader, not the book. Educators should carefully analyse guided reading text to ensure they align with the goals and teaching points that have been identified for a given group of readers. The quality of the text is important. It should be both engaging for the reader and fit for purpose, giving many opportunities for children to apply their learning. A wide range of text should provide children with the opportunity to learn about different genres and language structures. They should vary in length and format, as well as provide a range of fiction and non-fiction options. Further information about choosing from different types of reading text can be found in the Developing Tools for Reading video. A crucial element of text selection is ensuring that the level of difficulty is appropriate for the needs of the group. Text should sit within the child's current capability, allowing them to read independently whilst building interest, stamina and fluency. However, there should still be some level of challenge and opportunity for new learning, which will allow children to continue to grow their skills as a reader. The demands of the text should be suited to the level of children's word recognition skills. Fountas and Pinnell have helpfully identified 10 characteristics which you can use to help you to consider text difficulty, as seen on the slide. These are genres and forms. text structure, the way the text is organised, content, themes and ideas, language and literacy features such as plot, characters or use of language, sentence complexity, vocabulary, looking at the meaning of words in the text, words, considering the length and complexity of them, illustrations, and finally, book and print features, such as the number of pages, use of punctuation, etc. There are some important aspects to consider when adopting a guided reading approach. The first of these is the role of the guide. They should be well prepared for the session so that they can preempt potential difficulties in the text for readers. They can also plan to focus on particular areas, model chosen skills for the group, and scaffold children's comprehension of the text. There will be times when the guide steps back, allowing learners to take control and show what they can do by themselves. This allows the guide to closely observe children's participation, with the understanding that they can be ready to provide support or challenge as and when needed. Bodman and Franklin state that the key to guided reading is the handover of responsibility to the learner. That's the guided bit. Another aspect is planning the organisation of guided reading in a classroom setting. While the educator works with one group, the rest of the children may be working on independent activities that don't need direct adult support. Children will need time and guidance to establish this routine so that they are able to work independently without interrupting the guided reading session. The approach to guided reading may vary slightly depending on the stage and reading ability of the group. However, Lesley University have identified a few components which will often be used. These are: the educator will form a small, flexible group. Although each reader will be different, their reading skills will be at a similar level at that point of time. The educator chooses an appropriate text for the group. The educator introduces the text to the group, drawing attention to key aspects that will be the focus of the session. The children read the text aloud together with support from the educator as required. Children will read some or all of the text independently and then discuss the meaning. Children share their thinking about the themes, ideas, or things they noticed about how the text was written. The educator selects one or two teaching points that will be helpful for the group. And finally, children may also focus on specific letter patterns or words to develop their phonics skills. The guided reading approach does not include any type of round-robin reading, where the educator asks learners to read one at a time whilst the rest of the group listen. Research has highlighted several drawbacks with round-robin reading. Kuhn helpfully explains some of these as: each learner is responsible for reading only a brief portion of the text. As a result, they have minimal opportunity to improve either fluency or their word recognition. Breaking up a text into smaller passages works against developing fluency. Instead of building up learners' reading stamina, it actually limits it. Further, these interruptions discourage comprehension of the material. Rather than looking at the connections that occur across the selection, readers end up focusing their attention on brief passages. And whether or not children know when their turn is coming up, they often read ahead so that they can sound more proficient when their turn comes, or volunteer just to get their turn over and done with, and then shut down for the rest of the session. However, we should still look to promote reading aloud as part of a guided reading session, as it can improve children's reading fluency, which is strongly associated with comprehension. Shanahan highlights that children need larger amounts of text to improve reading fluency, so taking turns one at a time in a group is an inefficient way of providing this. He goes on to suggest some preferable alternatives as reading in pairs, where children alternate after each paragraph, choral reading, where learners and educators read the same section of text simultaneously, and repeated reading, where children read the same passage multiple times. Another suggestion could be echo reading, where the educator reads aloud to children and they follow by echoing the text back as a group. Regardless of which of these methods are used, the educator should take time to listen in to children as they read aloud, in order to monitor progress and provide appropriate support to each child as needed. Further information about different methods to support children to read aloud can be found in the signposting section. Comprehension discussions should be a prominent feature of guided reading sessions. Pre-planning comprehension questions can help to support the discussion and encourage children to develop a deeper understanding of the text. Founders in Pinnell encourage us to use dialogue in order to get readers thinking and using what they know. This involves responsive teaching based on observation of the readers and the opportunities offered by the text. The teaching points can focus on the precise needs that we've identified for children. Some examples of questions that you might use to help children notice aspects of the text are: who are the most important characters? What is the problem and how was it solved? And what were the 3 most important ideas in this information text? We can organise guided reading sessions into the 3 stages of before, during and after reading. According to the needs of the group, educators may choose to focus on 1 or 2 of these teaching points at different stages in the guided reading session. We will start by considering the before reading stage. After carefully considering the text that will be used during the session, introduce children to any new vocabulary through some pre-reading activities. Opportunities to explore different types and features of text prior to reading could be useful. Children may also benefit from some support with background knowledge which may help them to understand the text. Research tells us that the 2 biggest barriers to comprehension are background knowledge and vocabulary. The educator may also want to introduce the text prior to reading, providing a purpose for the reading session. They could also model the reading skill or strategy that they would like the children to focus on during the session. Prediction is an important part of pre-reading activities, as it encourages children to be active in the process of reading, thinking ahead and asking questions. Children can preview the text, skimming through headings and pictures, etc., to build some familiarity with the topic or meaning of the text beforehand. There are a wide range of strategies that educators can model and encourage use of during reading. These include reviewing the predictions made during the pre-reading stage, making any further amendments and further predictions. Children can also be supported to connect their background knowledge that they bring to the text, as well as make links with other texts they have encountered. The more connections we make to a text, the more likely we are to comprehend what we read. Visualising encourages readers to create a mental image of what they have read. This helps bring the text to life, engages the imagination, and uses all of the senses. Children can be encouraged to use their phonic knowledge to recognise words in the text and context to help them understand meaning. They can reread some of the text to improve their understanding as needed. It is also helpful for them to pause at certain places to reflect on what they have read and sort out the important information. Checking or monitoring comprehension is an important step so that children can become increasingly aware when meaning breaks down and know what to do when this happens. Children will also be working on maintaining fluency, reading at a good rate with phrasing, pausing, intonation and appropriate stress. Activities after reading can support children to analyse text more deeply. These include making and answering questions, which encourages readers to interact with the text while monitoring their understanding and considering prior knowledge. Making inferences will help children to fill the gaps an author has left in a text. They can use background knowledge and information from the text to read between the lines. Group discussions can support learners to concentrate on the specific details that they didn't understand during the reading session. They will learn to search for and use information from the text by noticing and using information sources. Summarising helps them to identify and accumulate the most important ideas and restate them in their own words. Listening to, watching or reading other related texts can help to further expand children's vocabulary, ideas and content knowledge. Role-playing can also be used to help children portray their understanding through body language, words and gestures. It is also important for learners to think critically about the text. Is it accurate, interesting, etc.? Although we have outlined strategies in the specific stages of before, during and after reading, there's likely to be a great deal of overlap. There should be flexibility to use strategies whenever they can be most useful for the learner. As we reach the final key message, we will explore how research-informed, guided and shared reading methods support the progress of the learner. Reading is complex and educators are required to make important decisions to ensure that teaching methods are responsive to the learner. Effective use of assessment and planning is key to supporting progress and building both independent and engaged readers. In this quote, Bodman and Franklin state that teaching children to read requires skill and knowledge. We use assessments to ensure that the book and teaching objectives are pitched to the child's current competencies. We plan carefully around the book, plotting teaching points and preparing for any challenges. We can also consider the teaching prompts that will provide helpful aids to independent problem solving. They state that a good guide knows their purpose. To guide effectively, we have good background knowledge of how children learn to read, and we are clear which learning outcomes we are supporting for the group to achieve. Assessing children's individual progress will help us to ensure that we develop a full understanding of children's reading skills and can identify any potential barriers to learning. We can do this by observing children reading, talking to them about their reading, and through listening to them read. Noticing the errors that children make over time and recognising the developing strategies and strengths which they use to overcome them helps us to build on what the child can do and focus our teaching decisions to extend their learning. Learners may not develop skills in the same order or pace as others, so educators need to be able to respond to assessment information flexibly in order to best support children's reading progress. According to Fountas and Pinnell, the key to effective teaching is your ability to make different decisions for different learners at different points of time, honouring the complexity of development. This makes the dynamic forming and reforming of groups and decisions about appropriate teaching methods particularly important. It is also crucial for educators to select different texts and make decisions about pace in response to learners' identified strengths and needs, rather than just follow a fixed sequence of reading texts that children must progress through. At the start of this video, we heard that a range of planned approaches should be used by educators to develop reading skills whilst nurturing a love of reading. We have learned that guided reading provides the small group instruction that allows for a closer tailoring to individual strengths and needs. However, children also need the experience of authentic, real-life text. In guided reading, the educator can be there not only to question but to listen, to really know how well the child is understanding and accessing that text. While shared reading can be a social, inclusive reading experience that offers the opportunity for educators to model elements such as fluency or enjoyment of a text. Penny Bell suggests that the best choice is to incorporate the strengths of both systems. Shared reading can create that buzz of shared conversation about a known character or exciting plot, together with the clarity of teaching the chosen reading outcome of the day to every child in the room. Then after 15 to 20 minutes or so, it can be seamlessly followed by group learning situations. They also go on to suggest the options of paired teaching, one-to-one sessions where relevant, or even with children leading their own groups, having received the necessary training to do this successfully. There are a whole range of pedagogical approaches which allow for more focused work with those children who need it. Elsewhere in this resource, we have also emphasised the importance of the wider literacy-rich environment, which allows children to explore the various aspects of language development which are required for reading. As we reach the end of this video, Fountas and Pinnell remind us that reflective teaching is rewarding because you are learning about teaching. They talk about the importance of taking time to pause and ponder, asking ourselves some critical questions about how we teach reading. Either individually or with colleagues, you may want to reflect on the pedagogical approaches which you use to teach reading in your setting. These could be shared or guided reading or perhaps other methods which you have in place. the reflective questions may be a useful starting point. A video overview, glossary, signposted resources and some reflective questions have been created to accompany this video. You can use the QR code on the screen to access these.